Hi, everybody. It's Scott Licky from Democracy Tomorrow. We have a very special guest today from a very special place, probably a place that has appeared never or very rarely on YouTube or anywhere else, and that is the Ontong Java Atoll in the Solomon Islands in the Pacific Ocean. The Ontong Java Atoll is the world's largest atoll. It stretches very far and wide. It's about 500 kilometers from the capital, Honiara. And today we have with us our friend George Kayola from Ontong Java Atoll speaking to us from the atoll. So, George, welcome to Democracy Tomorrow. How is life right now in Ontong Java?
Everything in Ontong Java is okay right now since that the people are enjoying with the batch team fishing. Yeah, since the government has lifted the ban. Yeah, that's to do with batch steamer and with how people get their food. But after the batch steamer, when the batch steamer season is over, that's when everything starts come back to reality, right? Facing with the these climate change issues and financials and the rising sea levels and all these ones. So it's not like the same all the time. It just depends on the seasons, but especially when the vegetable season is on.
That's essentially the only source of income for the atoll. Is that right, George?
Yeah, apart from the beach steamer, they have we have copra that we can depend on. And there are fish over here too, but the sea cucumber is like most people they get a lot of money from that because of its value. Like the value is rising every year.
And what is the perspective right now about the potential of relocating Ontong Java to another island in the Solomons? Where does that stand?
From observation and from how people like they respond to that question, it's like most people they say that they can't uh, they can't really make a decision of moving away from this place, right? Most people like they are really connected. They're really connected to this island, to the resources, and for people to move away from these places, it's quite a complicated issue for these people to deal with, as people who born and grow up in these places. So one thing that I saw is most people they really want to stay here. If there's anything to move away, they find it like they're not going to accept it, but they want a home, maybe a second home away from this place, right? Yeah, but for them to leave this place and move away is not a thing that they really want to agree on, right? Yeah, they really want to have a second home away from this one. And anything to do with Onton Java, it has to do with a thing like making a seawall or putting barriers around the island to protect the islands. Yeah. So that is what most people were saying because of their love for this place and for their yeah their connection to these islands. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, right. I'll just explain the situation briefly to viewers so they understand the circumstances you're facing. Ontong Java looks like, let me see if I can do it, like that. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. There's 3,000 people living there, spread largely between two large villages. Um,
Mm.
there's no commercial traffic between Ontong Java and the capital Honiara. There's a supply ship that comes once every several months, but other than that, there's no plane, there's no helicopter, there's no, there's very,
Mm.
it's very
Mm.
difficult to move from there to anywhere else. And it is one of the most heavily threatened areas by rising sea levels in the world. And if you read
Mm.
today's New York Times, sadly, there's a headline that reads White House orders federal agencies to stop considering social cost of carbon. So the Trump administration has directed agencies to stop estimating the economic impact of climate change when developing policies and regulations. So that is the latest tragic decision
mm,
by the country that has released more CO2 into the atmosphere than any
uh-huh,
other. And the
mm,
consequences of CO2 and other gas releases is
mm,
very real to people across the
mm,
world. Many, many
mm,
hundreds of millions of people,
mm,
perhaps even billions, are going to face the loss of their homes and lands because of rising sea levels caused by climate change and global warming.
mm.
And George here today
Yeah.
from Ontong Java Atoll is one of those hundreds of millions of people who are facing the very real human consequences of climate change.
Mm,
And as George
mm,
has just said, the people of Ontong Java Atoll, the world's
mm,
largest atoll and one of the most isolated, do not want to move. Clearly, it's
mm,
the place they love. It's the place they're
mm,
from. They're happy to
mm,
consider having a second home, perhaps on
mm,
another neighboring, safer island. I should point
mm,
out, of course, that Ontong Java is generally not higher than 3 meters above sea level, so it's
mm,
at great risk of
mm,
permanent inundation and other consequences caused by climate change. So,
mm.
George, let me ask you, what are the people proposing so that they can actually stay longer on Java? What have they requested the government to do or the international community? How can the world help on Java, I guess is the real question.
I think for the people here, I for one, like what the really people here really want is, if there's anything the government can do for them, is to find them a second home somewhere in the Solomon Islands or elsewhere where they can find, or build something around these islands to protect these islands from losing our shorelines and all these ones. Yeah. So that is what those are the two things that I see that these people on this island they really want to protect these islands by building seawalls.
So people are thinking about they're proposing the idea of building a seawall around the entire atoll, or what's the plan? What are people talking about?
The people are talking about having a second home and in the other islands and protecting these islands, especially the main islands that peoples are settling on. Because to build a wall around the whole atoll would be very expensive for whoever is going to fund it. But for the main islands that people settle on, they agree to have something protect those main villages because there are at the moment I think only four or two main islands that people are settling on. So if the government or other international donors can do that for these islands, that would be a very big thing for these people.
And when they speak about a second home, are they talking about Guadalcanal and Honiara, the capital, or are they talking about islands that are closer by?
From previous findings through research, people are suggesting moving to islands like Guadalcanal or Isabel, right? But the thing is, Ontong Java is under Malaita province. So the Malaita already have identified certain areas on Malaita for the people to move. But the people here is like they're reluctant to move on these islands, right? Because they find it that it would be a bigger problem in the future if they move over there because of other things that might trigger in the future, like tensions or land disputes. Because Malaita itself, it has a common land dispute within itself, so that would be a very a scary thing for the people over here to move over there. Otherwise, yeah, something like that might trigger in the future. So people are holding back and holding back whether they are going to move over there or they just find any other islands that is they think more safer or something. But yeah,
That's a very good and very important point. There was an offer by the previous government to provide land on a neighboring island called Maleta, one of the biggest islands in the Solomon Islands chain, to the people of Ontong Java, but there was a lot of reluctance to move there because not only was it not an atoll per se, and it did not at all reflect the kind of ecosystem they were used to living within, but also it was largely inhabited by a different ethnic group. So
right,
they were
right.
afraid of land disputes. They were afraid of getting land that actually belonged to someone else. And something that people in the world need to understand is that it may seem to be the obvious solution to climate displacement that people move from one place to another, but particularly in the context of the Pacific, this
mm,
is not only a economic and social trauma that the people face, but it's
mm,
culturally almost an
yeah,
impossibility because if you move from the place you call home, you're
right,
automatically moving to someone else's land, whether it's
right,
on the same island or the same atoll or on a different one. You're never on your own land. And
right,
land and people cannot be disconnected from one another. Land and people are the same. And it's a
mm,
fundamental relationship to land, which is very difficult for people that are not familiar with it to
mm,
understand. Much of the
mm,
world is about buying and selling land as if it's just a commodity, but for people of the
mm,
islands in particular, land
mm,
is life itself. Land and
mm,
human cannot be
mm,
disassociated from one another. So the simple idea of moving from place A to place B is a lot more complicated than meets the eye. And that's what we found throughout all of the Pacific. Most people don't want to go. Most people
right,
want to stay,
mm,
even if staying is difficult. And the problem is, is that creating the engineering solutions that would allow that are
mm,
incredibly expensive and incredibly
mm,
challenging. And most of these
mm,
places that are threatened, it's not just the Solomon Islands, and Ontong Java is only one place in the Solomon Islands that
mm,
is already facing the scourge of
mm,
climate displacement. There are other places as well. But in
mm,
all of the neighboring countries, in Papua New Guinea, in
mm,
Kiribati, and in Tuvalu, and in the Marshall Islands, and in Tokelau, and
mm,
in so many other places, people
mm,
are basically having to choose between whether to stay or whether to go. And
mm,
in their hearts, they want to stay, and in their
mm,
brains, sometimes they want to go. And
mm,
reconciling those two feelings is incredibly difficult. So that's why it's really important what you just said, George, in your surveys
mm,
of your fellow Ontong Javanese islanders, that
mm,
many of them favor the idea of a second home somewhere else that will
mm,
provide security for the long term, but allow them to
mm.
live on the atoll as long as physically possible. So, George, thank you very much for joining us today. And, we wish you and all of Ontong Java, of course, and all of the Solomons, the wonderful Solomon Islanders people. I'm so lucky to have been there before and worked briefly on human rights issues. And I hope personally to come back soon. And we wish all of the Solomon Islands and islanders everywhere and everyone threatened by close coastal erosion and climate displacement all the very best in your struggles to come. We will continue to cover stories of climate displacement. Our next location that we will broadcast from is the eastern coast of Panama, from the Gunayala Indigenous Territory, which are also undergoing massive displacement because of climate change. We will go back to Bangladesh and speak to people there who are grappling against climate displacement, and elsewhere across the world. We will continue to cover this issue and all others, and again reiterate the point that only working together, only working in collaboration with all of us as citizens of the world, can we find a good way forward to deal with this and all of the other global problems that face us. So thank you again for watching Democracy Tomorrow. Thank you to George. Wish you all the best, and we'll see you soon.